Good morning, students. Today I'm going to start the next chapter of your Staff's book, The Enemy, which is written by Paul S. Buck. First of all, we'll know about the author. Paul S. Buck was an American writer and novelist. She had a Chinese name, Sai Zhuangzi, as she spent her childhood in China, being the daughter of missionaries. She was awarded the Pulitzer Prize in 1932 and the Nobel Prize in Literature in the year 1938. The Enemy is the story based on the grievances of Second World War. It was the time of 1941 when US and Japan were enemy. Japanese were superior to Japan and American thought that American was superior to Japanese. The people of both the countries were not fighting the war with the cannon, but they were having certain prejudice, certain feeling, thinking, and they were not entertaining any of the foreign people who belongs to the Japan or who belongs to the American. The main character of the story are Sadao Holke, the cardiac surgeon and a scientist, Sadao's father, a great patriot and concerned father, Hannah, Sadao's wife, who met him in America, American war prisoner who found at the doorstep of Sadao's house, General of Japan, who was a responsible person having a great responsibility of South Pacific. Introduction of the story. It is a time of the Second World War and the American prisoner of war is washed ashore in a dying state and is found at the doorstep of a Japanese doctor named Sadao. Sadao is in a dilemma that being a doctor, should he save the wounded man, or being a Japanese, should he hand over the enemy to the army? The writer introduces the main character of the story, Sadao Holke. The Sadao's house was situated in the coast of Japan, and he had been living there since his childhood. The house had a low height and was made of stone. It was set upon the rocky beach which had a boundary line made with pine trees that were tilted towards one side. When Sadao was a child, he would climb up the pine trees. On his visit to the South Seas, he would see men to do so in order to get coconut from the trees. He would accompany his father to the islands of South Seas often. His father would point towards the islands and would say that those were the stepping stone towards the future of Japan. Dr. Sadao would question him childishly that where would they reach from those islands? His father would reply that it was not known as it depended on the future. The future had no limit. It depended on mankind, how it shaped its future. Now Sadao retained all the things that his father would like him as a child. His father would like to tell him as a child. His father never played or joked with him. They shared a mature relations and his father underwent a lot of hardship to bring him up. Sadao knew that his father was concerned about his education. He was sent to America at the age of 22 to study surgery and medicine. When Sadao returned At the age of 30, before dying, Sadao's father saw Sadao become a famous not only a surgeon but also a scientist. Sadao was not his way to discover a treatment for wounds which would make them absolutely clean. At the time, the soldiers were wounded and they used to die because there were no treatment of their wounds. So, Sadao was in the way to discover the treatment for wounds which would make them absolutely clean. So he was not sent to abroad with the armed forces as a doctor. Sadao was one of the precious doctors of Japan. And at the time when the army troops used to migrate from one place to another place, in that troop there were so many doctors, nurses, soldiers, officers. But Sadao was not sent in any of the troop. And instead, he was stay back in Japan. One of the reason of staying him in Japan was that the old general who was suffering from an ailment which needed to be operated upon in the case of emergency. So he always remained in Japan. The writer described the scene outside Dr. Sadao's house. This was the surrounding of Sadao's house, outer side of the Sadao's house. Now, the story runs like that. As the day were usually warm and the sea waves were cold, the nights became foggy. Sadao was returning back from his clinic. He saw that the boundary of nearby island became invisible gradually as it got covered in the mist. Slowly, the mist was coming closer to him. Soon there would be a mist all around his house at a time. He would go back into the house to his wife, Hannah, who was waiting for him along with their two children. Harui, a loose outer garment worn over the kimono, and kimono is the traditional Japanese garment. Before Sadao could go inside, the door opened and his wife looked out for him. She was wearing a dark blue colored brown gown over her dress. She welcomed him with a smile, remained silent, and stood by him. This was the present of the story. Now story moves to flashback. They had met in America. Both Sadao and Hannah met in America. Sadao knew that his father would marry him to a Japanese girl only, and so he ensured this before falling in love with her. Sadao considered himself to be lucky to have her as a wife. He accidentally met her at an American professor house from Professor Harley, and he wondered that had he not met her, he would not have got a wife all his life. He thought that the professor and his wife were kind as they were keen to help foreign students. I told you earlier that at the time the Americans never entertained Japanese or any foreign students. But Professor Harley was entrusted to entertain the foreign student. That is why various foreign students went or visit his house. Sadao and Hannah were also of those students. He was glad that they had accepted this kindness and went to their house because it was there that he had met Hannah. And Sadao met Hannah in Professor's house. Sadao often tell Hannah that he was a mere it was a mere coincidence that he went to the professor's house that night because as the room in his house was small and the food was not good and the professor's wife was very talkative. If he had not gone there that night, he would not have met Hannah. So at that time, Hannah was a student and she also used to go there. Sadao had thought that he would love her if he belongs to Japan. Sadao and Hannah loved each other. Now they have two children. They had not married in haste in America. Rather, they returned to Japan, sought permission from their parents, and then got married in a traditional Japanese ceremony. They had discussed all details before wedding. They were happy with each other. Now, the story comes into the present, and both husband and wife were standing on the veranda. At that moment, they saw a figure appeared out of the mist. Mist was there, and it was their house was covered with the mist. A figure appeared through the mist. It was it appeared black in color due to the mist in the air. The outline of the man's body was visible in the mist. He walked unsteadily. He was about to fall with his arm above the head. It was an indication that he was a prisoner. The man walked a few steps and disappeared in the mist. Now, children, some difficult words: heedlessly, carelessly, staggered is word there in the text. Walk unsteadily as it about to fall. Leaned means bent forward. They leaned the veranda railing. Upon seeing the figure, Hannah reacted by asking, "Dad, who was that?" Both of them bent forward over the railing of veranda to have a closer look of that man. They saw him again. He was crawling on his hand and knees at the time on, and then he fell on his face and kept on lying there. Probably he had fainted. As the area that village is full of fishermen, Sadao said that probably it was a fisherman who had been washed off his boat. He ran to him to help him. Hannah followed him. The loose leaves of her harui flew as she ran. This part of the coast was inhabited. It was empty beach, and as it had dangerous rock on it, as the rock were pointed, very dangerous, very pointed, the man could be badly injured, although he had managed to come through them. So here we find that Sadao and Hannah found a wounded soldier on their doorstep, and they were looking and thinking that he may be a fisherman. So children, that's all in this class. The rest part of the chapter will be continued in other lectures. Read the chapter thoroughly so that you may understand. Thank you.